The Silent Frontier, Trust in the Wild West. Jacob Turner adjusted his wide-brimmed hat as the sun dipped low behind the dusty hills. He had been traveling for days along a rough unpaved road, pulled by a tired horse that snorted with every step. Behind him in a simple cart sat his daughter Lily, her small hands clutching a worn doll, her big brown eyes filled with curiosity and fear. They had left their old farm in the Midwest after a harsh winter and a series of misfortunes that had left them struggling to survive. Jacob hoped the frontier town of Red Mesa could offer them a new beginning, a place where he could work hard and give Lily a better life. The town appeared suddenly, like a mirage among the rolling plains. A few wooden buildings lined the dusty main street, their weathered signs swinging in the evening breeze. A general store displayed tin cans and sacks of flour in its window. A blacksmith shop banged with a rhythmic clanging of hammer on metal. And at the far end of the street, a small wooden courthouse and a modest jail hinted at the presence of law, however limited it might be. Jacob pulled the cart to a stop in front of the only inn in town, its sign swinging gently red. The Silver Spur. The building had seen better days. The paint was chipped and the porch sagged under the weight of years. Still, it offered shelter and, more importantly, the chance to hear news of the town. Inside, the inn smelled of warm bread, wood smoke, and the faint tang of livestock from travelers just arriving. Jacob led Lily to the small reception desk, where a stout woman with graying hair looked up from her ledger. "Evening," she said, her voice both kind and cautious. "Looking for a room?" "Yes, ma'am," Jacob replied, tipping his hat. "Just for the night. My daughter and I are new in town." The woman gave him a brief appraising glance. "Name? Jacob Turner. And this is my daughter Lily. Room's $5 a night," she said, scribbling something in the ledger. "Breakfast included. Dinner if you want it, though the cook's busy this time of day." Jacob nodded, handed her a few coins, and followed her upstairs to a small room at the end of the hall. The walls were bare, the bed stiff, but it was clean. Lily immediately set her doll on the windowsill and pressed her face against the glass, watching the last rays of sunlight fall on the town. "Papa," she said softly, "do you think we'll be safe here?" Jacob knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I don't know for sure, sweetie, but we'll make our own way. We'll meet good people, and we'll be careful about those who aren't." Lily nodded, though the question lingered in her eyes. In the quiet of the room, Jacob thought about what lay ahead. The frontier was a land of opportunity, yes, but also danger. The Wild West wasn't a place for the careless. He would have to earn trust carefully, and every decision could carry weighty consequences. The next morning, Jacob stepped out onto the wooden sidewalk, dust swirling around his boots. The town was waking up. Horses neighed in the distance. Merchants called out their prices. Children ran past, chasing one another and kicking up small clouds of dust. Jacob noticed men loading sacks into wagons, women sweeping porches, and the occasional stranger who looked too hurried or suspicious to linger. As he moved through the town, Jacob's eyes caught a sign at the edge of the main street. Sheriff Eli Brooks, Law and Order. He had heard of the sheriff before coming. Stories of a man who upheld the law but was not afraid to face danger himself. Jacob decided it would be wise to introduce himself, to show that he was serious about settling in responsibly. The sheriff's office was a simple building, with a single wooden door. Inside, a tall man with a weathered face and sharp eyes looked up from a stack of papers. "Can I help you?" the sheriff asked. "Name's Jacob Turner," Jacob said. "I'm new in town, just looking to start fresh with my daughter. I wanted to say hello." The sheriff studied him carefully, then nodded. "Fresh starts are hard in Red Mesa, Mr. Frank. Turner, people here value trust more than words. You'll need to prove yourself. And stay aware. There are folks outside town who won't hesitate to take what isn't theirs." "I understand," Jacob said. "I don't intend to cause trouble." "I just want a chance to work and live honestly." "Good. That's all I ask. Keep your wits about you, and you'll do fine." Leaving the sheriff's office, Jacob felt a small sense of relief. At least one person in town seemed to understand the challenges ahead. He spent the rest of the morning exploring Red Mesa, looking for a piece of land where he could settle. A few miles beyond the town, he found a small plot on the outskirts. Empty, untamed, but with potential. The soil seemed fertile, the water from a nearby stream clear and cold. Jacob envisioned a cabin there, a small garden, and perhaps someday, animals grazing nearby. Returning to town, he visited the general store, where he met Rosa, the woman who ran it. She was a widow, her eyes sharp and observant. She offered supplies and advice, quietly testing Jacob with questions about his plans and skills. "You'll need more than hope to survive here," Rosa said. "You'll need neighbors you can trust, and the strength to stand alone when trust is broken. The land isn't easy, and neither are the people." Jacob listened carefully. Her words were not meant to discourage, but to prepare him. He purchased some tools, sacks of seed, and a few basic provisions. Rosa wrapped them carefully and handed them to him with a small smile. "Start small," she advised. "Plant what you can tend, and don't forget your daughter. She'll need stability more than anything else." By evening, Jacob returned to the inn with Lily, tired but determined. He sat on the porch, watching the town's activity settle into quiet. People gathered at the saloon, laughter and music spilling into the night. But Jacob kept his distance. He wasn't here for entertainment. He was here to build a life, one careful step at a time. That night, as Lily slept, Jacob thought about the journey that had brought them here. He had lost much, his wife, their old farm. But he still had hope and determination. The frontier would test them, yes, but it would also give them a chance to prove themselves, to find people they could trust, and to build something lasting. He understood that Red Mesa, like the wider West, was a place of contrasts, hope and danger, kindness and betrayal, opportunity and risk. Jacob knew the coming days would challenge him in ways he could not yet imagine. But as he gazed out at the darkened plains, he whispered a silent promise to himself and Lily. They would endure. They would survive. And together they would find their place on the silent frontier. The wind whispered across the hills, carrying with it the scent of earth, wood smoke, and the faint aroma of distant campfires. Jacob felt a mix of unease and anticipation. Every creak of a wagon wheel, every distant shout, was a reminder that life here demanded vigilance. But in that challenge lay the possibility of something greater: freedom, independence, and a chance to shape their own destiny. As the first stars appeared above Red Mesa, Jacob finally allowed himself a deep breath. Tomorrow, he would visit the land he hoped to call home and begin the work of clearing, planting, and building. Tomorrow, the frontier would start to reveal its secrets, and he would meet them with steady hands and a careful heart. Lily stirred in her sleep and murmured, "Papa?"
"I'm here, sweetie," Jacob whispered, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "We'll face it together."
Nothing can take that away from us. And in the quiet of the Silver Spur, father and daughter rested, unaware of the challenges that lay ahead, but ready, in their own way, to meet the harsh and beautiful life of the Wild West. Jacob Turner woke early the next morning, the light of dawn spilling across the town of Red Mesa. He felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in a long time. The day ahead would be full of work and decisions, and he knew that each small action mattered in this harsh land. He dressed quickly, checked that Lily had her breakfast, and together they stepped out into the crisp morning air. The town was already stirring. A wagon rattled down the main street, its wheels leaving tracks in the dry dust. Men shouted greetings to one another, and children ran barefoot across the wooden sidewalks. Jacob's mind was already on the land he had scouted the day before. It would take hours to reach, but he needed to see it in the full light of day to begin planning. "Papa," Lily said softly, gripping his hand, "do you think the land will be as nice as you said?" Jacob smiled.
It will be, Lily. It's just waiting for someone to care for it.
"And we'll care for it together." They left the town behind, the wooden buildings giving way to open plains. The grass was tall and dry, but in patches near the stream it was green and thick. Birds flitted among the bushes, and the sound of running water filled the air. Jacob felt a small thrill of hope. This was the place where he could start over, where he could build a home for himself and Lily, away from the hardships they had faced before. As they reached the edge of the land, Jacob began imagining a small cabin with a wooden porch, a vegetable garden, and perhaps a few animals grazing nearby. He knelt in the soil, testing its texture. It seemed fertile, soft in some areas, harder in others. He could see how, with time and effort, crops could thrive here. His heart lifted at the thought, but the frontier was not without its challenges. Jacob knew from the stories he had heard that this land, like all lands beyond the town, was not entirely safe. Outlaws, rustlers, and dishonest men sometimes preyed on settlers. And while some neighbors were kind, others might look at newcomers as opportunities for gain rather than friendship. Trust would have to be earned carefully. After a long morning of inspecting the land, Jacob and Lily returned to town. He carried with him samples of soil and a few plants he hoped to transplant. He wanted to speak with Rosa at the general store before buying tools and supplies, to learn more about what life in Red Mesa truly required. Rosa greeted them with a sharp smile. "Back so soon, Mr. Treyad?" "Turner, you'll wear yourself out if you're not careful." Jacob chuckled. "I want to make sure we start right. This land has potential, but I need to understand it better." Rosa leaned on the counter, studying him with her keen eyes. "You'll need more than hope and hard work. You'll need neighbors you can count on. And you'll need to know when to be cautious." "I understand," Jacob said. "I plan to live honestly, work hard, and help where I can. That's all I ask in return." Rosa nodded. "Fair enough. Start small. Plant what you can care for. Keep an eye on your daughter, and observe the town. People here talk, and actions speak louder than words." Jacob purchased tools, seeds, and other supplies, careful to take only what he could manage to carry. Rosa packed them in burlap sacks and tied them securely. "Be careful," she said. "The land is open, but dangers sometimes hide in plain sight." That afternoon, Jacob returned to the edge of town where his plot of land waited. He began clearing small areas for planting, moving stones, and marking spaces for future fences. Lily helped as much as she could, fetching small tools or carrying water in a tin bucket. She enjoyed the work in a way that made Jacob smile. Even the hardest day felt lighter with her by his side. As they worked, Jacob noticed signs of life around the land, tracks from deer, the burrows of small animals, and the occasional bird circling overhead. He realized that the land was alive, and that understanding it meant patience and observation, just as much as hard labor. Late in the afternoon, a rider appeared on the horizon. A young man on horseback approached cautiously, waving a hand in greeting. His name was Samuel Harper, a neighbor who ran a small ranch a few miles from town. He had heard about the new settler and wanted to introduce himself. "Afternoon, mister." "Turner," Samuel said, tipping his hat. "I hear you're starting fresh here. I'm Samuel Harper. This land's good, but it isn't easy to work alone." Jacob extended his hand. "Thank you for stopping by. I'm Jacob, and this is my daughter, Lily." "It's good to meet neighbors. I hope we can look out for each other."
Samuel studied Jacob for a moment, then nodded. "That's the way it should be."
Folks here get along best when they trust each other, and trust can be hard to come by. They talked for a while, and Samuel offered advice about planting seasons, water sources, and the occasional challenges with wild animals. He warned Jacob gently about rustlers who sometimes tried to steal cattle from nearby ranches, and reminded him to always secure his property. By the time Samuel rode away, Jacob felt a sense of reassurance. Meeting a helpful neighbor gave him confidence that life on the frontier could be manageable with careful planning and cooperation. As evening fell, Jacob and Lily returned to town for a simple meal at the inn. The aroma of stew and freshly baked bread filled the small dining room. The inn was busier than the previous night, with travelers and townsfolk sharing stories and news. Jacob listened quietly, taking mental notes about the town and its people, aware that understanding the community was just as important as tending his land. After dinner, he stopped by the general store once more to thank Rosa for her advice. She smiled warmly. "You're learning quickly, Jacob." "That's good. Keep it up." and this town may become a place you can call home. Jacob returned to the inn as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of orange and purple, and the first stars began to twinkle above Red Mesa. Sitting on the porch with Lily by his side, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The day had been long, full of work and discovery, but he felt that sense of possibility he had been seeking for so long. "Papa," Lily whispered, "do you think people here will like us?" Jacob put an arm around her shoulders. "We'll make friends, Lily. We just need time and patience. Trust is something we earn, and we'll show people who we really are." The wind carried a soft rustle through the trees and across the plains, a reminder that the frontier was alive and ever-changing. Jacob understood that life here required resilience, courage, and careful judgment. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also the thrill of opportunity. That night, as Lily slept soundly, Jacob sat by the window, staring at the darkened land outside. He imagined the cabin he would build, the garden he would tend, and the life he hoped to create. The frontier was quiet now, but he knew that challenges were ahead, tests of character, moments of danger, and opportunities to prove himself as both a father and a man of integrity. He made a silent promise to himself. He would protect his daughter, work honestly, and meet every challenge with courage. He would observe the town, learn its rhythms, and find the people who could be trusted. And he would face the wild land not with fear, but with determination and careful thought. For Jacob Turner, the frontier was no longer just a distant dream. It was real, vast, and alive, and it had chosen him as much as he had chosen it. With Lily by his side, he knew that together they could navigate this new life, slowly building a home, a community, and a sense of security that had been missing for so long. As the first chill of night settled over Red Mesa, Jacob felt a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The land would demand hard work, the town would test his patience, and life on the frontier would challenge him in ways he could not yet imagine. But he was ready. He had hope, determination, and the love of his daughter, tools stronger than any weapon or shield. And so, in the quiet of the frontier night, father and daughter rested, hearts full of possibility, ready to face whatever the coming days would bring. The days passed quickly for Jacob Turner as he settled into life on the edge of Red Mesa. His cabin was taking shape, simple but sturdy, and he had begun planting vegetables along the small strip of cleared land. Lily was learning the rhythms of frontier life too, fetching water from the stream, feeding a few chickens Jacob had managed to buy, and even helping him dig small holes for seeds. The work was hard, but it had a strange satisfaction. Every stone moved and every seed planted felt like progress. One morning, as the sun rose golden over the plains, Jacob noticed fresh tracks in the dirt near the edge of his land. They were horse tracks, wide and deep, leading away toward the distant hills. He frowned, a sense of unease settling in his chest. The tracks were too organized to belong to wild riders. Someone had been here recently, observing, perhaps even planning. He knew the frontier could be unpredictable, but something about these tracks made his stomach tighten. Later that day, as Jacob worked, he met Samuel Harper again. Samuel was bringing news from the town. "Jacob," he said quietly, lowering his voice, "there's been talk about some rustlers in the area. They've been taking cattle from nearby ranches. Nothing violent yet, but they're bold. Keep an eye out." Jacob nodded. "Thank you for letting me know."
I'll be careful. I don't intend to let them trouble my land or the neighbors.
That afternoon, Jacob spent extra time reinforcing the small fence around his property. He checked his rifle, cleaned it carefully, and considered setting up small traps, not to harm anyone, but to alert him if someone approached the cabin at night. Lily watched quietly, sensing her father's concern. "Papa," she said softly, "are there bad people coming?" Jacob put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "There might be, Lily, but we'll be ready, and we'll be careful. That's all we can do." As evening fell, Jacob decided to take a walk toward the town, partly to rest, partly to gather more information. The streets of Red Mesa were quieter than the day before, the air filled with the smell of wood smoke and dust. He passed the sheriff's office and stopped to speak briefly with Eli Brooks. "Evening, mister." Turner, the sheriff said, noticing Jacob. I hear you're settling in well.
I am, sir.
Jacob replied. But I saw tracks near my land today. They didn't look right. I just wanted to make sure I stay careful. The sheriff nodded gravely. Good instincts. Keep your rifle ready and don't confront anyone unless you have to. The rustlers are clever. They work in groups and they take risks. Trust your judgment. Jacob thanked the sheriff and continued toward the general store. Rosa was there, stacking supplies and speaking with a few customers. She noticed him immediately and waved. Jacob! You've been busy. How's the land? Good, he said, smiling faintly. But I saw tracks I didn't like. I'm trying to prepare for anything. Rosa's expression grew serious. You're smart to watch. People sometimes take advantage of newcomers. Be careful who you trust even among neighbors. And don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. Jacob nodded, appreciating her advice. I will. I just hope it doesn't come to that. The next morning, as Jacob worked on the cabin, he heard the sound of horses in the distance. He looked up to see 3 men riding quickly across the plains, their faces shadowed by hats. He didn't recognize them. His heart raced as he realized they were heading straight for the property line between his land and the neighboring ranch. He ran to Lily, who had been playing nearby. Lily, inside! Quickly! She obeyed without question, running to the small cabin. Jacob grabbed his rifle, checked it carefully, and stepped outside. The men slowed as they reached the fence, one of them waving a hand in what seemed like a greeting. But Jacob knew better. These were the rustlers Samuel had warned him about. Their eyes darted, calculating, and their horses were tense. Evening! One of the men called out. You new here, aren't you? Jacob's voice was steady, though his hands gripped the rifle tightly. I am. What do you want? The man laughed lightly. Just passing through. Thought we'd see who's settling near us. Jacob studied them carefully. There was a challenge in their stance, a threat hidden beneath casual words. He knew that a wrong move could put both him and Lily in danger, but he also knew that standing firm was essential.
I watch my land, Jacob said.
I don't want trouble, but I'll protect what's mine. The men exchanged glances. One of them, slightly older, with a weathered face, spoke. We're not here to steal this time, but newcomers need to know the rules. The land has ways of teaching lessons. Jacob understood immediately. They were testing him, seeing if he would back down. He didn't flinch. I understand. I'll mind my own business, and I expect the same from you. After a tense moment, the men spurred their horses and rode off toward the distant hills, leaving Jacob and Lily shaken but unharmed. Jacob knew this was only the first test. They would likely return if they saw opportunity. He reinforced fences, kept the cabin secure, and observed the land for any sign of the rustlers. He also spoke more with Samuel, who advised him on strategies to protect his property without provoking unnecessary conflict. Despite the danger, Jacob found moments of peace. He and Lily shared small joys, like planting the first rows of vegetables, watching birds swoop across the plains, and naming the small plants after family members. These small acts reminded him why he had come to the frontier, to create a safe, meaningful life for his daughter. Then, one afternoon, as Jacob returned from gathering water, he noticed that part of the fence near the stream had been tampered with. A few boards were loose, and the ground showed signs of hoofprints. He felt a mix of anger and concern. The rustlers had returned, closer than before. He called Samuel immediately, who arrived within an hour. Together, they examined the damage and planned a careful response. They would not confront the men recklessly, but they would show that Jacob's land was protected. That evening, Jacob sat with Lily and explained what had happened in words she could understand. Some people aren't careful or kind, he said. But we don't respond with anger. We respond with thought and care. That way we stay safe. Lily nodded, trusting her father. She was beginning to learn the lessons of the frontier, the balance between caution and courage. Over the next week, Jacob and Samuel continued to patrol the land during the day, repair fences, and set up simple alarms to detect intruders. They remained alert without becoming fearful, understanding that preparation was their strongest defense. The town of Red Mesa had become a quiet, watchful community, and Jacob appreciated that he was not completely alone. By the end of the week, the rustlers had not returned directly, though tracks in the dust suggested they were watching. Jacob knew it was only a matter of time before another challenge came, but he also knew that he had proven something important to himself, to the town, and perhaps even to the men who tested him, that he was capable, careful, and not easily intimidated. As the sun set over Red Mesa, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Jacob and Lily stood on the small hill near the cabin. The land stretched endlessly before them, wild and untamed, yet full of promise. Jacob felt the weight of responsibility, but also the strength that came from facing challenges with honesty and courage.
Papa, Lily said softly, do you think they'll come back?
Maybe, he said, but we'll be ready.
And we'll face whatever comes, together. In the quiet of the evening, Jacob realized that the frontier was not just a place of danger. It was a place of lessons, where patience, careful observation, and courage could protect those who lived honestly. The rustlers had tested him, but he had responded with thought, not fear. That was a victory, even if it was small. As night fell, he lit a small lamp in the cabin and watched Lily fall asleep. The wind whispered through the plains, carrying the scent of earth, grass, and distant campfires. Jacob felt the life of the frontier surrounding him, sometimes harsh, sometimes kind, always alive. And he understood that the days ahead would continue to test him, but with careful choices and trust in those who proved themselves, he could meet those challenges. The Wild West demanded courage, yes, but also wisdom, patience, and the ability to understand human nature. And Jacob Turner, determined and thoughtful, knew he was ready to face it all. Life on the frontier had grown into a routine for Jacob Turner, but the quiet days were deceptive. He had repaired the fences, tended his small garden, and taught Lily the ways of the land, yet he knew that danger could arrive without warning. The rustlers had been quiet for several days, but Jacob sensed that they were still watching, waiting for the right moment. One hot afternoon, as the sun beat down on the plains, Jacob noticed something unusual. The chickens were clucking nervously, and the small garden he had been tending showed signs of disturbance. A few plants were trampled, and the earth bore fresh hoof prints. His heart sank. The rustlers, or someone, had been on his property again. Jacob quickly gathered Lily. "We need to be careful," he said firmly. "Stay close to me, and don't wander off." She nodded silently, trusting him completely. They moved to the small cabin, locking the door and checking the windows. Jacob could feel the tension rising. Life on the frontier was teaching him that danger often came in unexpected ways, and even people who seemed trustworthy could act against you. That evening, Jacob visited the town to speak with Sheriff Eli Brooks. The sheriff listened carefully as Jacob described the signs of intrusion. "You're right to be cautious," the sheriff said gravely.
These people are bold. They've tested many settlers.
"But I'll tell you something, Jacob. Sometimes the threat comes not just from strangers, but from those we think are our neighbors. Keep your eyes open." Jacob nodded, absorbing the warning. The sheriff's words were heavy with meaning. He realized that life in Red Mesa was not just about protecting land, it was about understanding people, discerning who could be trusted and who could not. Over the next few days, Jacob strengthened his defenses. He repaired fences, built small barricades around the garden, and kept his rifle close at hand. Samuel Harper visited regularly, offering advice and practical help. "You've done well to notice the signs early," Samuel said. "Most people would have ignored them until it was too late. But you can't fight every problem with force. Sometimes patience and careful planning matter more." Jacob appreciated Samuel's wisdom. Together, they set simple traps, not to harm anyone, but to alert them if the intruders came close again. They also arranged signals with the neighboring ranches so that any unusual activity could be reported quickly. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Jacob was startled by loud noises. He grabbed his rifle and ran toward the commotion. To his horror, he saw figures moving near the edge of the property, shadowy shapes that were too quick to identify clearly. He shouted warnings, but in the confusion, Lily had wandered toward the fence, curious about the movement.
Lily! Inside! Jacob yelled.
But it was too late. One of the figures grabbed her small arm and ran toward the horses waiting at the far edge of the land. Jacob's heart pounded, a mix of fear and determination flooding his body. Without thinking, he sprinted after them, shouting for help. By the time he reached the spot where the figures had been, Lily had disappeared from sight, carried away by the intruders. Jacob stopped, gasping for breath, feeling a cold emptiness settle in his chest. His daughter was missing. Panic and dread gripped him, but he forced himself to think. Samuel arrived minutes later, having heard the commotion.
Jacob! What happened? They took her!
Jacob shouted.
Someone grabbed Lily. We have to find her.
Samuel nodded, his expression serious. We'll find her. We'll track them carefully. But we need a plan, not panic. Panic will only make it harder to catch them. Together they examined the ground. The hoof prints led toward a narrow trail along the hills. The intruders had moved fast, but their path was visible in the soft dirt. Jacob followed closely, scanning every detail. The direction of the prints, the broken twigs, the faint sound of movement ahead. Hours passed as they tracked the rustlers. The sun set completely, leaving the plains bathed in moonlight. Jacob's worry never eased. Each step carried the weight of fear for Lily's safety. He kept his focus sharp, determined not to let his daughter become a victim of lawlessness. Finally, they found signs of a small camp hidden among the hills. The rustlers were unaware that anyone had followed them. Jacob and Samuel crouched behind a ridge, observing the camp. They saw Lily, sitting quietly but unharmed, though her face was pale with fear. Relief, mixed with determination, surged through Jacob. He needed a careful plan to retrieve her without provoking violence that could endanger her. Jacob whispered to Samuel, "We'll approach carefully. One wrong move and it could go badly. We need to show we are calm, not angry." Using patience and caution, they moved closer under the cover of darkness. Jacob called out softly, identifying himself and asking the intruders to release Lily. The rustlers hesitated, surprised by the unexpected approach. Jacob's steady voice and calm demeanor showed that he was not a man to be easily intimidated. After tense moments, one of the older men motioned for Lily to come forward. She ran to her father without hesitation, wrapping her small arms around him. Jacob's relief was overwhelming. He glanced at the rustlers, their expressions now cautious rather than threatening. "You won't trouble this land again," Jacob said firmly. "You can leave, and we won't stop you, but do not come near my home or my daughter." The intruders exchanged glances, then slowly mounted their horses and rode off into the night, leaving Jacob, Lily, and Samuel in the quiet of the hills. Jacob hugged Lily tightly. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Nothing will happen to you while I'm here." The journey back to the cabin was slow, but Jacob felt a renewed sense of determination. The incident had been terrifying, but it had also taught him an important lesson. Trust must be balanced with vigilance. People could betray expectations, and even familiar faces might hide hidden motives. The frontier was not forgiving, and only careful judgment and courage could ensure safety. The next morning, Jacob shared the story with Sheriff Brooks, who listened carefully. "You handled this well," the sheriff said. "But remember, the frontier is full of lessons like this. Not everyone who smiles is a friend. Sometimes the challenge comes from within your own community." Jacob nodded. He realized the sheriff was right. The danger had come from strangers, but the town itself could hold secrets. Even neighbors who appeared friendly might have hidden motives, testing newcomers to see if they were strong or easily intimidated. Over the following weeks, Jacob focused on rebuilding confidence and security. He reinforced fences, strengthened the cabin, and developed routines that allowed him to monitor the land without constant fear. He also deepened connections with Samuel, Rosa, and a few other trustworthy neighbors. These relationships were invaluable. They provided advice, support, and a sense of community that counterbalanced the harsh lessons of betrayal. Lily gradually returned to her playful self, though Jacob remained vigilant. He taught her how to notice signs of danger, the importance of staying close, and how to act calmly in difficult situations. She learned quickly, absorbing the lessons of the frontier with the curiosity and resilience that only children possess. Jacob reflected on the recent events often. The loss he had feared, the panic, and the confrontation had been terrifying, but they had also reinforced the values he held dear: courage, careful judgment, and unwavering responsibility for those he loved. The frontier tested more than skill, it tested character. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Jacob sat outside the cabin with Lily. The air was warm, carrying the scent of grass and soil. He felt exhausted but resolute. The rustlers had been driven away, but the experience had changed him. Life on the frontier demanded not only hard work, but constant awareness and thoughtful decisions. "Papa," Lily said softly, "will we be okay now?" Jacob smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "Yes, Lily. We will be okay. We have each other, and we have friends we can trust. We'll face anything that comes our way, together." The wind whispered through the trees and across the plains, a quiet reminder that the frontier was both beautiful and dangerous. Jacob understood that challenges would continue, but he also knew that he and Lily were stronger for having faced them. Trust could be fragile, but courage, wisdom, and love could protect them even in the most uncertain times. As night fell, Jacob felt a sense of calm he had not known before. He had confronted fear, protected his daughter, and learned that life on the frontier required more than strength. It required careful thought, trust in those proven loyal, and the courage to act when necessary. The Wild West was a place of harsh lessons, but also of hope, and Jacob Turner was determined to navigate both with steady hands and a careful heart. The weeks after Lily's kidnapping were tense, but transformative for Jacob Turner. He had reinforced his cabin, repaired fences, and maintained constant vigilance over the small plot of land he now called home. But he had also learned something more valuable than defense or preparation: the strength of community and the power of trust. Samuel Harper continued to visit, offering guidance, and Rosa at the general store had become more than just a helpful neighbor. She was a quiet source of wisdom and encouragement. Yet, despite all precautions, Jacob knew that the threat of the rustlers had not vanished entirely. Their tracks were still seen near the outskirts of town, and word from other settlers suggested that the gang had become bolder, emboldened by the fear they inspired. The town was uneasy. Even Sheriff Eli Brooks, who rarely showed alarm, had called a meeting with the townspeople to discuss strategies for protecting Red Mesa. Jacob attended the meeting, standing among neighbors who shared concern and determination. "We cannot let fear rule our lives," Sheriff Brooks said firmly. "We must face these outlaws together. One person alone cannot stop them, but united, we can defend our homes and families." Jacob felt a sense of resolve settle over him.
The sheriff's words were clear. The time for preparation and caution was over.
The rustlers would come again, and when they did, the town had to be ready. Jacob knew that this was not only about his own property or his daughter's safety. It was about standing up for everyone in Red Mesa. The next morning, Jacob and Samuel walked across the plains, inspecting the areas where the rustlers might attempt another strike. They set up small signals, rocks arranged in a certain pattern, markers near the fence line, and even a simple bell system that could alert neighbors if anyone approached. These precautions were simple, but effective.
"You're ready,"
Samuel said. "Not just with fences and guns, but with thought. That's what will keep us safe." Jacob nodded, but his mind was focused on the bigger challenge. The rustlers were clever, and he knew that courage alone would not be enough. Strategy, teamwork, and calm thinking would decide the outcome. That afternoon, Jacob returned to his cabin to check on Lily. She had grown more independent and cautious since the previous incident, but she still radiated the same curiosity and resilience that had carried them through so much already. She helped him carry water and stacked firewood for the coming night. "Papa," she said quietly, "do you think they'll come back today?"
Jacob paused, looking out over the plains.
The sun was high, casting long shadows over the hills. "They might," he said honestly. "But we are ready now. We've learned from them. and we have friends who will help. We will face them together."
As evening fell, the warning signs appeared.
Dust rose in the distance, and Jacob recognized the telltale shapes of horses approaching.
This time he was not alone.
Several neighbors, including Samuel, had come to support him, quietly taking positions around the edge of the land. Sheriff Brooks rode up, his calm presence inspiring confidence. The rustlers arrived, a group of 5 men, confident and bold. They had expected to intimidate a single settler, but now they were faced with a united town. Jacob stepped forward, rifle in hand, but held low, his voice firm. "You have no right here," he said.
"Leave now or face the consequences of coming against more than one family. We mean no harm, but we will defend our homes."
The rustlers hesitated. They were not used to encountering such preparedness, nor had they expected the townspeople to stand together. A tense silence followed, broken only by the creaking of saddles and the soft whinny of horses. Sheriff Brooks rode forward, speaking with authority. "This is your last chance. Leave Red Mesa and never return. We will not pursue unless forced to, but we will not allow harm to our community." For a moment, the rustlers' confidence faltered. Jacob saw in their eyes that they were uncertain, unsure if they had underestimated the courage and unity of the town. One of the older men who had spoken to Jacob weeks earlier finally nodded and motioned to the others. Slowly, they turned their horses and rode away into the hills, leaving Red Mesa behind. The tension remained for a few moments longer, then dissipated as Jacob and the townspeople realized they were safe. Relief washed over him, and he lowered his rifle, feeling the weight of worry lift from his shoulders. Lily ran to his side, wrapping her small arms around him, her face glowing with trust and admiration. "You did it, Papa," she said softly. Jacob hugged her tightly. "No, Lily, we did it together. Everyone helped. And that's the lesson of this land. You survive and succeed when you work with those you trust and care about." The next few days were filled with repairs, reflection, and quiet celebration. Red Mesa felt alive again, not just with survival, but with a sense of community that had grown stronger through shared challenge. Jacob continued his work on the cabin and land, but he also spent time talking with neighbors, learning more about them, and understanding the importance of relationships built on trust and cooperation.
Rosa at the general store offered warm encouragement.
"You've done well, Jacob. You've shown courage, patience, and wisdom. That's how life in the frontier is meant to be lived, not just by fighting, but by understanding and building bonds." He had learned that lesson in a way he would never forget. Courage alone had not saved him or his daughter. Careful observation, patience, planning, and reliance on trustworthy neighbors had made the difference. One evening, as Jacob and Lily stood on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills, he reflected on how far they had come. The land was still wild and unpredictable, but it was now theirs, in a meaningful sense. They had faced fear and danger, had been tested, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to the people around them. "Papa," Lily said quietly, "do you think it will always be this way?" Jacob smiled, taking her small hand in his. "Life on the frontier will always have challenges, Lily, but now we know how to face them. We have each other, and we have friends we can trust. That makes all the difference." The wind whispered through the plains, carrying with it the scent of earth, grass, and distant fires. Jacob felt the vastness of the frontier around them, the quiet promise of opportunity, and the reassurance of safety earned through careful action. He knew that the lessons of courage, vigilance, and trust would remain with them forever, guiding them as they continued to build their life in Red Mesa.
In the following months, Jacob's farm flourished.
The garden produced vegetables, and he managed to acquire a few animals. Lily ran freely across the land, laughing and exploring, her innocence restored but tempered by the lessons of experience. Neighbors often visited, sharing stories, helping with repairs, and offering advice. Jacob's reputation as a man of integrity, courage, and careful judgment grew, earning respect from the town and even some of the more cautious settlers nearby. Jacob often thought back to the moments of fear, uncertainty, and danger. He realized that those experiences, as frightening as they had been, had taught him invaluable lessons. Trust, once earned, was stronger than fear. Courage paired with thought and patience could overcome threats, and the bonds of community could turn even the harshest frontier into a place of safety, growth, and hope. One late afternoon, as the golden light of sunset bathed the plains, Jacob and Lily sat on a small hill overlooking their cabin. The land stretched endlessly, a mixture of wild beauty and human effort. Jacob felt a quiet pride. They had faced the challenges of the frontier, survived threats, and built more than a home. They had built a life filled with hope, trust, and love. "Papa," Lily said softly, "I'm glad we're here." Jacob hugged her close, feeling the weight of the past months lift. "So am I, Lily. So am I. This is our home, and we will face whatever comes together." As night fell over Red Mesa, stars appeared one by one, shining brightly over the frontier. Jacob Turner knew that the challenges of the West would continue, but he also knew they had the tools to face them: courage, careful judgment, and most importantly, trust in one another. The silent frontier had tested them, but it had also rewarded them with safety, friendship, and the promise of a new life. And for Jacob and Lily, that was more than enough.